All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. While as folks are arriving, I'll be making some general introductions and framing tonight's discussion. We're here for an information session on applying for Enfoco's Media Works in Progress Fund, which is a $2,000 support grant for works in progress. And we'll be defining what all of that means and kind of reviewing the application in case you are developing a submission or thinking about it, or you just need to sort of take notes in general for insights. So really the objective is to give applicants kind of some perspective on what happens on the back end and what are some common weaknesses versus strengths from from arts administration perspectives. So I got that out of the way. The Enfoco Media Arts Work in Progress Fund, as I said, is a $2,000 support grant to support New York City artists of color who engage with digital media technologies in their art making processes. This is in collaboration with BronxNet, and the awards focus on applicants needing support for the completion of a quality work in progress as determined by a panel of professionals, such as our guest tonight, multidisciplinary artist Arancha Araujo. And also joining us is Enfoco's Director of Operations, Kim Vaquedano-Rose. My name is Charlie Vasquez. I'll be moderating. So Arancha Araujo is a Mexican multidisciplinary artist with a background in neuroscience. Her work is feminist and rooted in biobehavioral research. Explorations of gender constructions, performativity, and identity, and the politics of migration are also seen and experienced in her installations, which include video, sound, photography, and other media, and she's been exhibited all around the world. So we're glad to have her perspective on tonight's panel. And also with us is Kim Vaquedano-Rose, who oversees Enfoco's Photography and Media Fund Fellowships, the publication of Nova Luz, all kinds of back-end work at Enfoco. And she brings over 12 years experience in exhibition management and coordination to the work she does with us. She's also a graduate of the Bronx Council on the Arts Art Handlers Training Program, which she completed in 2006. Okay, so we kind of want to start the evening's discussion by saying that there's a common misconception that organizations such as Enfoco and other funders and nonprofits make the decisions for these grants and support funds internally. And that's not the case. We actually bring in panelists from outside who bring sort of an objective, neutral point of view to the process to make it fair so that there's no perceived favoritism and so forth. So what we're going to do tonight is starting with that, framing the discussion with that. What do the panelists look for? Okay, and we'll begin with eligibility because the Media Fund has some very specific criteria. So we can start the conversation by discussing what constitutes a media work in progress by an emerging artist. What does that sweet spot mean in case potential applicants are unsure of whether they're emerging, whether they have a work in progress, the intersection of those two criteria. Let's discuss that a little bit with whoever wants to jump in first so that people are clear as to whether they are eligible for this or not.
Sure, I can jump in and then Kim can complement whatever I say. Well, definitely there needs to be a component. You first mentioned media. So that needs to be apparent to the panelists. If I'm applying with a film project or if I'm applying, I need to make that apparent. What is it that I am applying with, right? And it needs to be apparent to us that this project has started and it's somewhere in the middle of progressing. So it needs to be a work in progress. And if you think this is apparent for you, make it apparent to the panelists. Don't leave any questions for them. Sometimes as a panelist, you're like, oh, I have this information over here, but is this a work in progress? Have they begun? So tell us the story. And the last thing was emerging artists. And there's, you know, a little bit of controversy there. But if you've gotten a Creative Capital an award, for example, maybe you don't qualify as emergent anymore. So if you have questions regarding that, I would advise contacting Kim, so that you, if you're already not considered early career artist, then just contact Kim and get the answer before you do all the work.
Cool.
And you can contact us at grants@infoco.org if you want to check in about eligibility, and I'll reply to you there.
All right, thank you both. Yes, I think the word emerging can be a little mysterious sometimes. And I think we're sometimes not clear if there's sort of boundaries, if that's sort of fenced in area. So yeah, if you have any questions about whether you qualify as an emerging artist, you can definitely, we'll have time starting at the Q&A tonight at about 6:45. There'll be time to revisit the emerging question, and also at the email address, we're going to drop that in the chat box for you. And I also, prior to the beginning of the program, dropped in the Media Fund application page from the Infoco site, so you can be reviewing this while we're having the discussion. Okay, so, okay, cool. So now we move past eligibility. Let's say someone has a work in progress. The work has been begun already. They haven't quite hit the end of the timeline. There's still work to do. They qualify as an emerging artist. What the application, there's several parts of the application. So I think what we can do is sort of walk through it sequentially. They need to compose a project proposal. So what are some, and maybe this is for you, Arantxa, more so as an experienced panelist. What do you look for in a project proposal? What are some of the signs, some signifiers of success, things that you look for in the proposal as a panelist makes you, let's say that's the first thing you see. What is it that makes you want to learn more about a project? Some markers of success versus weakness.
Yeah, so to me, the most important thing is to get your point across about what this that you're proposing is, right? So it might be really, like, you might be working, I don't know, 2 years with this project, so it's really like known to you, but just go back to basics. What is it? As I said before, is it a film? Is it, you know, LED, augmented reality project? And then describe that. Also talk about, you know, the process. If it's you begun this project, tell us where you are in the process. Tell us what do you intend to do to finish this project. So some of the process that is coming, and what you envision the end project and product like, right? So that we can have some idea of what this is. And also, I really would advise to use samples as a way to reinforce the project, right? So if you have a sample, don't hesitate to say, in the sample number 1, you're able to see this, which I'm using for this project. So then I can really envision what you're proposing. Kim, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Like Arantxa said, just having your narrative reflect not some, but all of the work samples that you're submitting. You want to make it very clear for the panelists that are reviewing your work. You have to understand that they're reviewing a lot of submissions in one day, so they can become very fatigued. So you want the information to be as simple as possible and as clear as possible. So whatever you're writing in your description, you might want to maybe summarize it in your first line of what you're looking to do, and then elaborate, just so that you can grasp the panelist's attention right away with what you're intending to do with your project.
Cool. So in
And
summary,
one last thing to add, Charlie, sorry, one last thing to add is, you might be an expert in your discipline, and most likely the panelists know about the discipline or might be experts, but you might get some panelists that are not so savvy about that discipline. So, explain it in simple terms, to, like try to avoid jargon that, I sometimes as a panelist, I have to go and look for certain words that I'm like, oh, what is this? And it's something that's like really rooted in a specific discipline. So, try to tell the narrative for the panelists in a simple way that really communicates that what you intend to do.
yes, I think there's a really specific balance between providing enough context to inform someone who doesn't know much about the medium or the kind of work you're doing, while without making assumptions that people are going to know everything you know. So I think in summary, we discussed specificity of the work, okay? The what, when, how, why, where. These are things that as creators, we sort of take these things for granted. We have to articulate that. Specificity and clarity about those details. Kim mentioned the narrative points. Arantxa, the comment you contributed about citing your work samples, so, referencing the supplemental materials that you send, give the panelists some interesting, make those connections and make the evaluation process for the panelists really sort of integrated and cohesive. And I think that's great, great advice. So, okay, I think that's good for the project proposal. And we can always come back to that if anyone has any questions. We will be sort of fielding questions a little later. So you may want the attendees may want to start writing that down so that we can get to that. Okay, we're going to leave the budget for last. We also need a resume and 100 to 200 word biography. So I'm trying to tackle all the narrative bits because I know people get really intimidated by having to write. These are all very different documents. So the artist bio, okay? What are some essentials here? What are some suggested do's and don'ts? Because there's a little bit of overlap with the artist statement, and I think sometimes that gray area kind of muddles them a little bit, I've noticed. So the bio specifically, what should the artist bio contain?
Do you want to get started this time and then I'll go?
Do you mind going first?
Oh, okay, for sure. So we'll start, as Charlie said, I think that some people, and including myself, sometimes we get confused artist statement and bio. So the artist statement is basically your conceptual framework of why you do what you do, right? What you're trying to accomplish, a little bit of the themes of what you touch in your work. And the bio, I personally like including one line about what my work is about. So almost like a statement short, and then almost including some of the important milestones where I presented and some of the important awards that you've gotten. And this gives the panelists information about where you are in your career and, where you presented. So it's really valuable information that can be read in 100 words so fast, right? So I think last year we had about 60 applications and each panelist had to read all 60 applications. So you can imagine the amount of work it is. So if you make it easy for us, like this bio really gives you lots of information in 100 words, which I really, really appreciate. And talking about the project again, do it simple so that you can get the point across. But yeah, that's about the bio. Kim, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. So like Arantxa said, your artist statement is kind of an overall your practice. It doesn't have to be specifically about the work that you're submitting because that is your project description. But it can touch on the other aspects of the type of work that you do that might help inform the type of work that you're submitting for review today for this application. And then, like Arantxa said, just there are a lot of samples online of how to structure a bio, and you want to just introduce yourself. You want to mention maybe some of the education that you may have that pertains to the work that you're doing, and keep it short. I mean, we're making you keep it short by limiting the number, but also know that this information will then we'll be using this if you are selected for the award. We use the same information to the public, so just know that other eyes will potentially read it as well.
So in summary, what I'm sort of gleaning here is the bio is really about you, your education, your background, some of your achievements, and the artist statement is more of sort of a visionary angle on how you view your work as the creator of it, as opposed to where you went to school and where you were born and how you identify. So I think that's kind of like the dividing line, and there is some gray area there. But I don't think that your MFA credits necessarily belong in your artist statement. That's something more for the bio. So as Kim suggested, there are great resources online for refining that, so that you're clear about it. Well, I think we can kind of skip the next point because we kind of merged bio and artist statement. Let's talk about the work samples. What are some, because that's really, at Foco and other organizations who are evaluating through a sort of a fine art lens. You can have you can be the best writer in the world. And if your work samples don't hold up, ultimately that's what's being exhibited and awarded. Work samples, how this is for media specifically for this particular support grant. What are some suggested do's and don'ts?
Sure, I'll start. So just some of the samples that you're able to submit are video, sound, images, PDF, and you have the opportunity to submit 1 to 5 samples. I would suggest that you submit the highest resolution that you can. You want it to be clear and for the panelists to be able to, if there is a still image, so they're able to see it and all the details in that. If you are submitting audio or video, you want to narrow it down to the specific section that you really want the panelists to see. You can have a sample that's 10 minutes long, but if really 30 seconds of it is the most important capturing information, that's what you really want to submit, or at least indicate that that's the starting point. There's other opportunities for them to see the rest of the work, but you want them to see the important, part of what your sample is. Again, panelists are seeing a lot of information in one day, and you just want to make it easy for them and very clear. Do you want to add anything, Arantxa? I know I have more.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of things that come to mind. If you submit, let's say, a link, make sure that the link is available for a year, because I've clicked on links and the video is no longer available. And I'm like, oh no, and this might happen between the time that Kim checks that everything's working and the time that the panelists check it. So make sure that links are working. And then also one other thing I really want to add that's important. If you are applying with a project that's video and you submit all images or photos, that doesn't serve me to see what the project is going to be like. I might be able to envision if you explain it to me, but if you're applying with video, it's so much easier for me to see, oh, here's another video they did, so kind of just really, as Charlie said, link those samples with your narrative and explain it and let me know how everything's coming together,
I'll add that if you're
Sage
submitting,
advice.
if you're submitting something with an image that might have text on it, you might want to make that easy to read. So be mindful of the colors that you're using. You might want to capture someone's eye by using a lot of colors, but it might not be easy to read and digest. So just make it as clean and simple as possible. I know there's only 1 to 5 images that you can, or samples that you can show, but try not to put too much information on one sample. That's another thing that I've noticed other people applying with, that it's not as strong as you just submitting something very clear and using each sample slot.
And I will repeat what Kim just said, well, a couple of minutes ago. Please be mindful of your queue times. Don't send me 5 minutes of setup and then expect I'm going to watch the 5 minutes of setup. Like, as a panelist, you might jump around, but if you're giving me a piece of video, I'm assuming that the whole thing is going to be, for me to watch or provide queue times. And then if I watch the queue time and my allotted time for each person is, let's say, 5 minutes, I was just part of a panel and I had to at least spend 30 minutes, each day reviewing the samples, and it would just make my life a lot easier if you provide something that's a little bit shorter and really shows the work. I'm like, okay, done. There was some applications that were really easy to be, get support for these artists. And then there were some that I had to do lots of investigation work in order to really get to know the work.
Cool. So I think we covered active internet URLs, right? That this page is not available. Well, either is a support grant now, right? Museum quality, material starting with a bang, grabbing the panelist attention, leading with your strong work. And also I would think in this case, being in the position to be able to upload a video demonstrates that the work is in progress, right? So, all right, that's, I think we pretty much covered everything there. So let's get to the budget and then maybe backtrack a little bit and do some review since we'll have the time. The budget. This I've noticed as a panelist, people really get thrown off with this, and it's not as difficult as some people might think. So let's start with, what is the budget? What exactly is the budget? I have my sort of theory on it, but as from the reviewing end, when you look at the budget, is it a standalone document? What does it need to do?
So
okay, you can start, Kim.
Sure. Our requirements are quite simple. We just want to see what you're requesting. So because the monies, we're helping you complete a work in progress, it would be nice to see some of the expenses that you've had with this project. And then what can this $2,000 cover? And that would be in your description. So, if you do need editing of some sort, we can see that number reflected, or multiple things. It doesn't have to be one thing that you're using the money on, but that it's reflected in the budget. So, $100 to, I don't know, even rent equipment, then we see that. But you want to add anything?
Yes. So to me, the budget is extremely important. It really reflects the entire project, right? Sometimes I find more detail in so whenever narrative wasn't clear, I would go to the budget to see, okay, what is it they're proposing? And there I could find 4 performances, or, there I could find details that are factual. So these 2 things need to match. And ideally, I don't have to investigate in your budget, but the best budgets, income, where the money is coming from, expenses, where I'm spending the money, right? And the expenses, please always include yourself and pay yourself, right? How much is your hour? How many hours you're putting into this project? get a number, and then you need to find a match for the expenses from your income. And the income might be, you know, pending. It might be in Foco's grant, it's still pending, but I'm planning on you know, submitting something very strong, hopefully getting it. And if not, you know, you might have some pending because we're all artists, we're all in this world of grant applying, and we're waiting for this news. But you know, it must be there. Some organizations ask for funds coming from other organizations or other places. So like it might be, you know, individual donations, other foundation grants, it might be government grants, it might be that you're ticketing an event and those ticketed tickets, you know, that will become income. It might be that you're doing a film and you're gonna sell it, or, you know, whatever it may be, your income must match the expense. And it might be very simple, like 4 things that are coming, like money, income, and then 5 expenses. So like, let's say creative personnel or honorariums, it might be rentals, it might be space rental and marketing. And then you just need to like explain what it is that you're spending the money on.
Kim?
Was that clear?
I just want to add that I don't know if we went to it, but we were talking about eligibility. But what I should also add is what might make you ineligible is that we are not supporting still photography or still images. This project has to have we have a fellowship for photography alone, and we suggest that you apply for that opportunity. The media fund is very open, but it must have some media-based or digital aspect to it. It can be an installation, you know, it have projectors, something, but it can't be still photography. I don't know, do you want to elaborate on that more, Arancha, on some of the things that you've seen, type of projects?
I'm sorry, Kim, my communication broke a little bit. Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, I just want to say if you want to elaborate on some of the kind of media projects that people have submitted with before, just so that people can get a breath of what a media. Yeah.
Sure. So to me, as I said all the way in the beginning, is, you know, when you explain what the project is, make it apparent to the panelists that this is a media. Why is it media? Are you using a 360 camera? Are you using, you know, LEDs and Arduinos? Are you using a Kinect? Are you using video? You didn't, like, let us know what instruments, what platforms, what programs you're using to create this project, so that it is apparent to me that, oh, this is a new media project, you know? If you're just like, I'm gonna take photos, I'm like, this is not eligible. So it might be eligible, but you're not telling me the whole story, maybe, you know? So don't keep those important details to show eligibility to the panelists, because it would be, you know, a tragedy if you're ruled out because people think your project is just photography and it's not eligible for this, you know? So definitely make it really apparent what programs, what disciplines you're bringing together, what tools, what equipment you're gonna use. Yeah.
That's really helpful. And Kim, does the media fund require matching funding, or does it also operate as just a sole funding for a project?
It's just
You don't
support.
require matching funds. So if it's a $2,000 support grant, and there's any income in it that goes beyond the $2,000 that you would be getting from Foco. So if you're just relying on this to finish the work in progress, your income, if you're awarded, would be $2,000. That would be your income. If anyone is donating time, if anyone is giving you space, okay, these are in-kind expenses that you can add to that. If someone said, well, normally I would charge someone $500 for the space, but you're my friend, so I'm going to give, you can put that in there. And it also demonstrates that people are showing that people have faith in your project, and that you're getting support even if someone's donating space and time or services. So any little goodies that you're in that you're getting in addition to this to make your project, to help you finish the project, those are in-kind expenses. You don't need matching funds. And then your total expenses should be the same as the total income on top. So if you're getting the $2,000 and someone's giving you something for $500 that you're listing as in kind, then your total expenses on the other end of the budget should also be $2,500. So those numbers should match up. So I think that helps. I know we so far we have one question in the Q&A, which we're going to get to. Let's backtrack a little bit because we kind of covered a lot of ground there, and your input and insights were so helpful. What are some common mistakes? What are some things that you've seen on the evaluating end? For this particular support grant in particular, you may want to cite others just so people get some broader perspective. What are some red flags in applications that you as a panelist are kind of like, this person is not ready to get this person is not eligible for this. They're not ready yet. What are some common things that you've come across that applicants listening can try to avoid?
Cool. So I'll start with one thing. So we talked about narrative, bio, samples, and budget, right? Just now. These four need to tell the same story. You cannot tell me one thing in a narrative and then your bio is not reinforcing that, and then the samples are, completely different from the project you're proposing in terms of, either discipline, or if you're talking about, I don't know, let's say feminism, and you're presenting something that has nothing, just coherence. So one thing needs to reinforce the other one rather than subtract from your narrative, or so everything needs to add in the story. So if I'm gonna say the most important thing is being coherent throughout the application. So it's not just the narrative that matters. That's why we ask for various things. It's every little thing that adds up. So, once you read the whole thing, you're like, oh yeah, this makes total sense. You feel so satisfied when you read the whole thing. Sometimes you're just like, this doesn't really make sense, and I'm left with so many questions. So my advice is get someone that doesn't know anything about the project and doesn't know anything about art, perhaps, to read about these. And if they have questions, rather than being defensive, listen to these questions. This happened to me just now. With when you're doing a new project, or maybe that you just started, it's hard to really know what the heart of the project is. You have to write lots of times what the project is about and spend lots of time thinking and writing and thinking and writing and stopping and reading. And I send it to my dad and I'm like, hey dad, do you mind reading these? I'm trying to apply with these. My dad's an economist, like he doesn't know anything about art and probably doesn't even care, And he sent an email saying, can I call you? And I'm like, sure. So he called me and he's like, providing such incredible feedback with questions. And at the time I was a little bit upset. I was like, oh, he doesn't understand, But then I was like, oh no, that like I actually need to listen to what he's saying and then make this stronger. Like he's my dad. He wants to see me succeed, So don't take anything personal. Take every question as a way to make your project stronger.
A peer review, getting someone to look your application over, absolutely. A lot of times we just assume that everything is as it needs to be, and we can be blind to our own mistakes, or sort of things that are a little ambiguous and not clear that we just take for granted as the creator of this work does not communicate clearly to someone on the other end. So cohesiveness and clarity, and getting some outside perspective, getting someone else to look at it, to give you their take on it, on what they're getting and what they're not getting. Kim?
I'll also add that some things that I've seen being in the back end of a panel is that you want your first sample to be the strongest. Sometimes this is just the first, it's the first information that they see, and they might not click all the way through to every sample when they're first digesting your work. So definitely make the first couple images or samples that you have the best information that you can provide the panelists with your narrative.
All right, now let's invert. Did you want to add to that, Arantxa?
I'll add one more thing that I was thinking as Kim was speaking. In terms of the narrative, let's say, how many words do you have for this one, Kim?
It's 500 to 1,000 words, sorry.
Words, cool.
Mm-hmm.
So if you somehow in the first paragraph can tell us what the project is about, and then the rest adds to that, I already come to reading the rest of the paragraphs kind of knowing and really getting the information. We all have writing methods, and perhaps for a novel you don't want to give everything away in the first paragraph, but for this kind of writing, give everything away in the first paragraph. Let me know what it is so I can actually add to that project as I slowly. Arlene is having a problem with my audio visual. Okay. Yeah, so please be like, don't go into a deep concept about quantum entanglement and then hope I'm gonna get to the project by reading these, because after reading, I don't know, 28 hours straight of reading proposals, just simplicity is really, really appreciated.
Okay, so let's invert that now with the time remaining we have for this segment of the program before we take questions, because I see that we have a few, which is great. The opposite of that. You have a stack, you have 40, 50 applications. We're actually going to give the applicants your perspective as the evaluator. You've had a long day, you're evaluating one after the next, you're seeing strong applications, you're seeing, maybe what I like to do is kind of like breeze through everything that I get just once and then do a deep dive with each one. Everyone has their process, but give us, the applicants, an example of a time where you evaluated an application and it just performed the way it was supposed to. Like, what are some of the indicators of a strong and successful application when you're like, you know what, so far this person makes the cut. I really want to see this person get the funding based on the pleasurable experience they made, the evaluation on what they made happen for that evaluation. Any examples there that you can share?
I would say just, this is no excuse. Like, panelists are persons and, they have a job, and on top of that, they're doing this, and that's no excuse. Like, they accepted these or I accepted these, and I'm happy to go there. Personally, I like to, take it one at a time. So like, I would leave, let's say, every day 2 hours to do 3 or 4, because I really like to spend the time reading and trying to really understand. But yeah, like there were some that I still had questions, and when you still have questions after you spend half an hour trying to learn about someone's project, then I think I would like to support something that I'm like, okay, my money is gonna really, really support this project that I believe in, So even though as a panelist, I root for every applicant, sometimes when there's questions, I'm like, okay, this person needs to spend a little more time, developing the project so that they can come back next year and get this support, because this is a great project. I just need to know more details. And, unfortunately, we don't have the applicants there to ask them these questions, but we are giving the same prompt to everyone, right? So we are hoping that you spend some time actually sitting there with these questions and, deep reflection time to write these answers. And, some people have been doing longer. I think I've applied to grants up to 4 times, and then the 4th time I get it. And I'm like, okay, I'm happy because every time is a learning process. Kim, would you like to add anything?
Just had a thought, and it escaped me. But what might be helpful in your writing process is just to kind of do bullet points for yourself of what you've accomplished, what you want to accomplish. And what you want to accomplish might not always, it's a work in progress, so things change. But just to kind of have that timeline for yourself, and then that'll help you kind of develop what it is that you want to write, what's important to you, and what the panelists need to know. I think that's like a good strategy, just to kind of get those bullet points down for yourself, and then it will help develop the writing and what's missing. Because sometimes you can just write and you kind of miss an important step, but just seeing the bullet points, you can see what it is, what's the order. So I would suggest that.
And adding to that, I think usually like these grants are open for a month or 2. Don't leave it to the last moment. Try to do it early on, and then leave the writing for a little bit down, and then come back to it. You will realize how valuable this process is, because in doing that, you let your thoughts sink a little bit, and then you go back to it and you're like, oh, I'm missing this. So even before giving it to peer reviewing, make sure that you give yourself time to leave that down, percolate, and then come back to it and read it.
Yeah, we call that cooling down, where you're working on it and you're close to it and it's still hot. It's like you're still cooking it. You kind of have to create a little bit of distance from it and then come back to it. Kim, you were going to say something?
Yeah, also add that a lot of this type of work is collaborative in nature. So you want to also maybe mention roles, like who's doing what, make it very clear, who you are as an applicant and what you're doing in this project, and then what others are contributing. It just kind of helps, give the panelists the full picture of like how much you have on your plate and what is it that you're getting supported with. And also if there's particular resources that you might need, because we are collaborating with BronxNet, there are resources that they have that could support the project, and it might be helpful for us to know what it is, if you need camera equipment, things like that, editing tools, BronxNet will be able to support that aspect of the grant.
That's wonderful, Kim. So sorry, Charlie, just one thing about the adding. So when you have collaborators, sometimes they should be reflected in the budget, right? So if you don't say anything about them in the narrative, and then in the budget, you're like editor and this price. And so if you already told me I'm going to be seeing 5 collaborators in this project, I'm expecting to see them in the budget. But this is the coherence thing I say. Don't just all of a sudden bring something up that you haven't mentioned before. Mention it in your narrative, and then it's going to be supported in the budget. Sorry for interrupting, Charlie.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you for that. Yeah, just start. The coordinates are who, what, when, where, how, why, and when. Literally start with that, because I think a lot of times, especially for creative people, it's really a lot about the how. It's about the work, and we forget about those other facets of the project. So that way, that you have to at least mention the when, the where, the other parts, the collaborate, the who's, what they do, etc., the costs, all of that. And that'll give you a nice sort of dimensional, some nice dimensional DNA to start fleshing out the project with, so that you don't omit one of those critical points, because they're all important. So that being said, we are going to take some questions here. I will get to all of you since there's 3 of you. Just be patient with me. I'm taking you in the order you came in. TW asks, does this fund support finishing a project, specifically funding final sound mixing or color correcting?
Yes, all of the above. The fund is to finish and help bring a project along, so you do not have to use this money to finish a project. We anticipate that you're still working on something. It might not be to its conclusion, but that you are actively working on something. And what might be helpful is to, if you know where you are in the stage of your project, you might want to give us a timeline. If you foresee it being completed in 2025, then that's your goal. But it's nice to know where you think you are in your project timeline. You might want to add that into the narrative as well.
Excellent. Okay, I think that answers that. Erica asks, thank you so much for this information. Is BronxNet part of the resources in offering equipment, etc.? I didn't see that mentioned, but thought I would check. I think we kind of came to that toward the end there, Erica. Anyone want to add to that about BronxNet's role and resources? And
yeah, so in the first year that we partnered with BronxNet, we were dealing with the pandemic, so their resources were kind of limited to online, and we're still kind of understanding how things are moving forward still, with COVID. So, but they do have resources to to help with specific skills. So if there's something that you'd like to do, if you need assistance with a certain aspect of your project, there will be a time to meet with BronxNet, speak with them about your needs, and see how they can supplement not just the award money, but anything else that they can do to help support or bring the project along. So that might be in the way of using their equipment, using their editing, or other aspects that they offer.
cool. So it sounds like BronxNet has a lot of sort of technical media-focused expertise to sort of lend to this, which is such a great collaboration. That's such a great resource to have there. So wonderful. Any other questions, panelists? You can either drop that in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll be checking. Erica says, thank you. You bet. Arlene Santiago, are you still here? Did you have a question, or will you be emailing that to us? This is a good time to chime in if you can hear us. I know she was having technical difficulties. I do, but I'm having problems with my hand. Okay. So Arlene, you can hear me. That's good. We do have that email address. I think it's grants@enfoco.com, where when you're able to type, you can send that question in as soon as you can, since the deadline is coming up, and we will make sure to get you the answer you need to help you with that.
Yeah, Arlene, I'll add that if you feel more comfortable speaking, we can, if you send me your contact information, I can give you a call during the week, and we can go over the questions that you might have. Okay,
and for the participants, that deadline is Monday, December 20th at 11:59 p.m. Okay, so if you haven't
Can
started,
you repeat that, Charlie?
It is December. Monday, December 20th, in about 6 days. In 6 days, at 11:59 p.m. So by midnight, December 21st, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just suggest, for those of you who are listening and you haven't yet developed your application, just take all this commentary to heart, and sort of strive for clarity. Give it a couple days, give someone time to read it. Start with your who, what, when, where, how. Make sure your budget is basically your proposal in numbers, and that everything sort of connects. It needs to be like this sort of symphonic collection of documents that sort of address the project from different points of view. There's Arlene's phone number. Thanks, Arlene. And I think that's it. We're coming up a little early. Any other?
I just want to add a couple more things. So I encourage everyone to apply. I will say that it is specifically for New York City artists, not New York State. So just make sure that you're in the 5 boroughs for eligibility. And you have to reside in the 5 boroughs. We do ask for proof of identification, and then again, once the award is announced. But please apply. This opportunity, if you aren't selected, we do have our apartment gallery series, which We have curators look at the applicant pool. We find that there's so much wonderful content in these pools, and unfortunately we can't fund everyone, but we can do other projects with the applicants. And our Apartment Gallery series allows us to exhibit these artists. We've done this with our fellowship program, and we've had exhibitions since 2017 in alternative spaces. So, please apply. There are plenty of opportunities. Even if you're not selected for this particular award, we do see it, and we do use applicants in other ways that we can. I want to also add that in our first round of awardees, one of them recently received the NISCA grant that we're helping them to, sorry, what's the word? We are their fiscal sponsor now. So, there's so many opportunities, and we want to be here to help support you in your project. So please apply, and we'll be here.
Yeah, I think Arantxa earlier, we have one more question we're going to get to. What I wanted to say, just from more of an objective perspective, for those of you who are new to applying for funding, don't get disheartened if you don't get the project funding right away. There's a limited pool of money. If you're new to the game, you're going to need to do some learning. If you keep doing it, at some point you will receive funding. But learning from rejection is a really, really difficult learning curve that we often have to put ourselves through. So just keep going. Don't take your first rejection as a sign of defeat. You may get it that second or third time. You have to keep pushing ahead. And Christina Cortez asks, is it okay if we want to use the $2,000 grant to keep producing, but we are trying to finish by October 2022? So it sounds like one of those mid-stage questions. She may not get to the finish line with this grant, but it would help advance her.
And I think she's asking specifically because within our guidelines, we say that we are going to do an evaluation at that point, and we just want to see where you are with the project. You do not have to be completed. If your goal is October 2022, that's wonderful, but if you don't meet it, that's fine. We just want to see what you were able to do with the money, if it was helpful, if there's anything else that we can do to help support the project, because we're not just giving you the money and say that's it. We want to help you see it along. So even beyond the that interview that we're calling it a final interview, it's not a final interview. We're still working with you. We just want to see where you are.
And Chang Jin Lee says, thank you, very helpful.
Questions. Do you accept students?
That's a good question. So no, we do not accept students because of the work that you are submitting needs to be work that you've created outside of formal education. So and maybe this one specifically, Arantxa, could they be a student in another non-artistic field? No. Okay.
No. So you cannot be in any degree granting program. So that's super important. And that's really, I am the program director for Franklin Furnace, another organization, and we receive funding from the same source as Foco for this project. So definitely it's really important that you're New York based. Are you doing Minnesota as well or no?
No, right now we're
New York. So New York based, non-student, and also early career artist is important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And my other question, oh, sorry, Charlie. My other question was, are you providing feedback from the applications if you don't get granted?
Yes, we try to get this the feedback from the panelists. So once you are notified, we can provide information. What is
to
sorry. I'm just gonna mute Bill for a second. Okay.
So please, if you don't get support, as Charlie and Kim have been saying, this is not the end of the world. It's actually learning opportunity. Get why you didn't get funded. Maybe one thing, the when wasn't clear, or, you know, maybe one of these things that we've been mentioning is not clear, and you can reinforce that point for either this application or other applications. So don't reinvent the wheel with every application. You can use the same project for many different grants. So then your time is more efficient, you spend less time, you know, and every time you refine. So if you get the opportunity to, and you get the grant, wonderful. If you don't, contact Kim and try to get some feedback. It's so wonderful to do it.
It is. Pitching your work in this context is a totally different skill than filmmaking, than being a great photographer. It's sort of a new learning area. So it does take time sometimes, but just keep pushing forward, learn, get some professional feedback when you can, and perfect your pitches moving forward. And at some point you'll get that dream grant. So I wish all of you a lot of luck and success. Thank you for tonight's wonderful panelists, Arantxa Araujo, Kim Vacadano-Rose. Thanks to Bill Aguado, the executive director. That email address again is grants@enfoco.org. My name is Charlie Vasquez. You can learn about me at charlievasquez.com. And good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you so much, Charlie and Kim and Bill. Lots of love. Look, good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Mucho, mucho amor.